All righty. Welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving online information entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am super excited to bring you my friend, Robbie Samuels. Hi, Robbie.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So good to connect again. I'm trying to think how we first got introduced. I'm pretty sure it was through a mutual friend, Small Pond.
Oh, was it Michael Roderick?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Michael.
sure.
Totally. Yeah,
He's
I think,
introduced me to so many amazing people. I met him through Dory Clark, and then I doubled my network after that.
don't we love people like that? I know. Michael's great. And if I remember correctly, I think you maybe helped co-host like some online Zoom meetings for him or something, which is
Yeah,
how
he
you and
and
I
he and
first
Jason Van
connected.
Orden host this really awesome networking event called Generous Entrepreneurs in Media, which you'll find at generousentrepreneursInmedia.com. So free once a month networking social for podcast hosts and folks who would like to be podcast guests. And yeah, it's one of the few that I highly recommend. And as a person who produces
Mm.
those kinds of virtual events, it
That's
sometimes
a
feels like I got in the
big
back of a
stamp of
cab
approval.
and I want to know, I know exactly how I want to get there, and the cabbie goes the wrong way. And I'm like, what are you doing? So when I get on someone else's stuff and they do a good job hosting, but really Jason and Michael are just fantastic guys. And
They are.
yeah,
I know
they
both of
attract
them.
great
And now
people.
I'm wondering, yeah, did Michael introduce me to Jason or vice versa? Anyways,
Mm.
small world. They are fabulous humans. If you're listening, Robbie just gave them both a big stamp of approval. And you'll learn in a minute what Robbie's expertise is. But um, producing online events, right, is in the bucket. And so for people
Mhm.
that do it well, I'm sure that kind of thing really stands out to you. For those of you that don't know Robbie, Robbie Samuels is an event design consultant and executive Zoom producer recognized as a networking expert by NPR, PCMA, Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Lifehacker, and Inc. He has also been recognized as an expert in virtual event design by JDC Events. He is a certified virtual convener. Oh, I have so many questions. And a certified virtual presenter. His event clients are national and statewide advocacy organizations, including Feeding America and California WIC Association. He is the author of 3 books, Break Out of Boredom, Low-Tech Solutions for Highly Engaging Zoom Events, Small List, Big Results, Launch a Successful Offer No Matter the Size of Your Email List, and Croissants versus Bagels, Strategic, Effective, and Inclusive Networking at Conferences. Collectively, they have received over 400 Amazon reviews and reached #1 in numerous international paid categories. He is a professional speaker, TEDx speaker, Harvard Business Review contributor, and has been featured in numerous leading business publications and business books. Since 2016, he has hosted the On the Schmooze podcast, and since 2020, No More Bad Zoom virtual happy hours. He is an out transgender owner of Robbie Samuels LLC, a certified LGBT business enterprise. Robbie, I am so happy to have you here today.
Thank you. And I have an update for you. That was written
Okay.
before my 3rd book was published. It is now over 650 Amazon reviews. It has reached a #1 bestseller in 29 categories across 4 countries. So my last book is currently at 223 reviews and 18 #1 bestselling categories.
That's amazing. Huge
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank
And I
you.
know you and I connected again during that process, right? So I've been
Yeah.
able to watch some of that unfold. We were joking before we went live about this podcast. And I said, yeah, I had 2 babies during COVID, a podcast baby and a puppy. And Robbie said that somebody had kind of fed back to him a recap that Robbie wrote 2 of those 3 books during COVID, right?
Yeah. They said, wow. And here's Robbie to speak with us. And Robbie wrote 2 books during the pandemic. And I just sat there going, I what?
Yeah, right. Well, everybody
I
else was
love
watching Netflix. What was that, like, cat show, lion tiger show on Netflix? I know, Robbie was writing books. That's so awesome. Well, I would love for you, because I think that there was a really poignant thing that happened in your career right ahead of COVID, right? Or, I mean, it was happening, and then you had to really transition when COVID
Mhm.
hit because of how relevant, right, this all became. Do you want to share that piece of your
Yeah,
story?
sure. So for over a decade before the pandemic, I was striving to become recognized as a networking expert. Half that time I was employed organizing fundraising events, but teaching and doing speaking engagements on the side. I then left my day job at the end of 2014 and went into full-time entrepreneurship, subsequently publishing a podcast on the schmooze. In 2016, 2017, my first book came out, Croissants versus Bagels. Then in 2018, my group coaching program went from a pilot to a full program. 2019, I was writing for Harvard Business Review, and I had the opportunity to do a TEDx talk about one of my stickiest networking tips. That TEDx talk came out in January 2020. I am poised to be an overnight success, 10 years in the making. March 2020, nobody cares about, I can laugh about it now. Nobody cares about
Right.
the skills and experience I have brought and learned over the last decade. And I had to find a new way to show up and share value. And so that became my mantra: show up and share value. And it led to me writing a blog post on Thursday, March 12th, 2020, 9 ways to network in a pandemic. And that night, I'm looking at
Um,
the list thinking I should do one of these right away. And number 3 was to host a virtual happy hour. And I wrote to a private group I'm part of on Facebook, hey, would anyone come? And that's how I ended up hosting my first virtual happy hour on Friday, March 13th, 2020, 5 p.m. Eastern. I did not do any research ahead of time to find out it was the right time of day, the week, or anything. But I ended up hosting that weekly for 2 years. And now I host the No More Bad Zoom virtual happy hour. It came branded a month later. I host that No More Bad Zoom virtual happy hour on the first Friday of every month. And I host a content and connection club mastermind weekly on all the other Fridays. So unbeknownst to me, that was the beginning of an amazing transformation for my business. 8 months later, I had a thriving 6-figure business based on all new revenue streams. I had created in April, I announced the pilot of a 4-week training to become more confident and competent using Zoom. 3 months later, that was a certification program. By the summer and fall, organizations were hiring me to bring their events online with less stress and greater participant engagement. And I now subcontract to some of the people that I've certified, and they have now are Zoom producers to help me support my event clients. And I work with speakers to help them design more transformative, engaging, and inclusive online experiences. And that's what led me to publish the third book, which is the culmination of everything I've learned in 3 years. The second book you mentioned, Small is Big Results, came out because everyone kept saying, Robbie, how did you do that in the middle of a pandemic? Well, the answer briefly is I'm a business growth strategy coach, and I was coaching clients in that very difficult time on behalf of a
mhm.
company. And then they asked me to take on a cohort of 120 students who were going through an online course about how to launch an online course, which is very meta. So I had a ton of people, dozens of people, hundreds of people that I was talking to. And that's where I was able to make such a big shift in like 4 weeks. I went from I'd
Mm.
never really thought about Zoom as a platform beyond hosting for podcasts, and then I'm the expert. So that's why I
Wow.
wrote the second book, to show other people how to build an audience before they try to sell anything.
So good. I mean, there's some things I want to like dive into in what you just mentioned. One, I feel like in some ways we had parallel lives going on. So March, like I'm in Seattle, right, which was ground zero for COVID.
Yeah.
And when that hit and things shut down here so early ahead of the rest of the country, I think it was like March 3rd, I sent out a newsletter that said, like, hey, small business owners, from a legal perspective, legal and protection scenario, like, here's what this could mean for your business. Here's what you need to be doing. And then immediately, maybe the next week, a couple weeks later, launched my weekly Ask Me Anything Live that ran for like a year and a half. I can't remember if it was a year that it went weekly or year and a half. And then I converted it to monthly.
Hmm.
But the big push was to get people online in their
Yeah,
businesses, get their online businesses protected, right? Really parallel conversations,
very much so.
and learned a lot by going live in a Zoom to my list every single week, the year of the pandemic,
I
that
was
it
so busy
started.
that year. I worked every day from April to November except for Father's Day and Thanksgiving. And I joke that Thanksgiving doesn't count because I said I worked every day that ends in Y and Thanksgiving doesn't. So, but I mean, the only thing that helped me know that a week had passed was this Friday event. We even did Christmas and New Year's together. It landed on a Friday. This was a committed group of people. We
Wow.
had 50, 60 people coming every week at the time. There was nothing else really going on. It was just this amazing community. And while I never
Mhm.
charged for it, it helped me understand that I had a skill that I could market
Yes.
and that I could help people.
Well, there were a couple things that I love that you said. One was about increasing engagement and
Mhm.
participation, right? How many Zooms have we all sat through where it's just like, just not enough of that? And whether it's a third party event being put on with a bunch of speakers, like regardless of what it was, right? I feel like
Right.
we all have things to learn in that department. So I want to ask you more about that. And then the second thing, and I really love this, and having reviewed your recent book and
Mhm.
read a huge chunk of it. Like, I was probably one of those folks like you sent out in your email, like, oh, this is my strategy, is to re-engage my connections, right, with this book and having them participate in the book launch. And just like you described, like I started reading it for purposes of giving you a review, and then I kept reading it.
Yeah.
Right? It was super fun. And you just tackle some really important topics related to the use of Zoom that not everybody is willing to talk about, or
Mhm.
really knows how to talk about, or has the skills to talk about, right? Like how do we create more inclusive online spaces, including in our Zoom room, right? Even from the standpoint of like some people are just naturally more introverted or
Sure.
whatever, right? And so I love that those are topics that you teach on, that you speak out about. I think it's super important, and all of us could do it better.
Well, I believe that events are about content and connection. It's the reason we're getting on planes before the pandemic and have started to again. Um, we don't just go far away to a conference in order to learn things because even before the pandemic, we could learn from home. Books have been around a very long time,
Right.
but podcasts and webcasts and webinars like they existed. So if we were going somewhere, it was also to meet people. We were hoping, and our
Mhm.
there have been studies around this. The International Association of Exhibitions and Events found that 76% of people surveyed said that networking was a top driver for why they chose an event, which is pretty high. But people's
Very
follow
high.
through on those intentions is pretty low. We don't think that 3/4 of people who go to an event met the people they were meant to meet. So I had been trying to close the gap between those intentions and that lack of follow through before the pandemic. Then I was faced with, well, how do we have that promise of content connection in a virtual platform? And I didn't have any ideas in March because my only model, which was everyone's model, was 45 minutes of death by PowerPoint followed by ineffectual Q&A and no one moderating chat. And it just isn't going to fly, right? It's so
Mm-mm.
2019. It wasn't a great model then.
Mm-mm.
3 years later, I have cracked the code over and over and over again. And that's why, writing that book, and I'm gonna just flashes on the screen. This is actually an example of I call low tech solutions. This is not through Ecamm or OBS. This is through a custom video filter built into Zoom. And it's something that you can get access to in the bonus content for my book at
Oh, I
breakoutofboredom.com.
love it. And
But
just so
that's what
you
I'm trying to
know,
teach people. It's like little things, like how do you get 5% better every time you host, speak, or even participate? Because you might get brought up on stage last minute and you better look good.
well, that's right. Yeah. And for those of you that are not watching the video, you're listening to the podcast. What Robbie has done is bring up his Break Out of Boredom book, like in this little overlay up in the
Like an
corner.
image overlay in the top corner. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So handy. I love that. So we should all be running over to the bonus section. I would love for you to dig into this idea of, because right, Zoom is not where we start, right? There's stuff that happens before we get to the Zoom, right? We're thinking about what it is that we're doing, that we're organizing, whether it's an event, whether it's just a live call, like whatever it is. Go back to the beginning with us. Where do we start so that we do it right?
Well, I think that the book, while focused on Zoom, has two pieces
Mhm.
that I think are relevant no matter what platform you're using. And it even applies to in person. And that is purpose first design and quality facilitation. So take those two things together and you're going to have a phenomenal event. So
Mhm.
purpose first design, I think relevant for everything we do. Right. But if you're going to have a meeting of any kind, even a team meeting, you should have a question about what is this meeting about? Because maybe the email would be better than a meeting, right? Like sometimes we don't need a meeting. When people are coming into your event, they are thinking, feeling, and are doing one thing. And when they get to the end of your time together, they're going to be thinking, feeling, and are doing another thing. In between is the transformation. And so
Mm.
we should get on the same page. If there are multiple cooks in the kitchen planning this meeting or this event, let's make sure everyone's put out their cards on the table. So we are very clear on what we're trying to achieve. And once you understand how you might want people to think, feel, and or do something differently, you use that to decide everything related to the design of the program. So years ago, when I was launching my podcast, and there was questions about like, I don't even know, it was like what color this or how my first question, whatever it was. And I remember the guy teaching us kept saying, what would your listener of one, where I think he said audience of one, who is your
Yes.
audience of one and what would they want? It's like, even that is an example of purpose versus design.
Mhm.
So, whether or not to have breakout rooms, if so, what kind of question, what kind of exercise, that should dictate how much time and how many people. I just see so many people floundering their way through where they know these tools exist, they know these features exist, and they do things like, all right, well, we're gonna have a breakout room. All right, let's see how many people are here. Okay, wait, how many people should we put? What's the math here? I'm so okay, wait, carry the one. And we're watching them mumble their way through this rather than coming in with a plan that is, I know I want people to discuss this specific question. I'm going to give them this much time. Therefore, there'll be this many people. We all now have 100 breakout rooms. I don't know if people even know that, but they've recently released a version that now everyone gets 100 breakout rooms. Really, unless you've got over 500 people, you pretty much can do any exercises you want. Really free for all. You want 6 people, 2 people. It's so stop saying it has anything to do with the number of people in the room, unless you're over 500, in which case hire a professional by that point. But
Mhm.
or maybe music. They learn that music is a thing, so they play music through Zoom, but then they talk over it. And I'm like, what was the point of you using music? So I just think that that's all really relevant. And then I can speak lots more about quality facilitation.
Mm. Well, and I mean, even just thinking about your example just now, like don't use number of people in the room as an excuse. Like what I want to point out, because I think a lot of people are shifting back to like, oh, in-person events. And still, I think many people are not traveling quite as much as they did before. But how challenging is it in a live event to break hundreds of people into little, three, four, five Z's and have them have a really potentially transformational conversation around a topic that you are presenting on? A completely different beast. Like in
Yeah.
this way, I think we can really embrace the benefits of technology and pay hyper attention to some of the other things that you're teaching us about how to do it right, how to achieve this connection that we all crave, how to facilitate things in the right way, right? You're smiling, so I know you
Yeah.
have more
Well,
to say.
because I've started using it. I'm not a sports ball kind of guy, but I have an analogy here that I think is relevant. And that is that if we try to play soccer, otherwise known as football to those in Europe, with hockey's rules, it won't make sense. I mean, on some level, they're very similar, right? Like they both kind of have a field and there's goals at each end, right? If you didn't know a lot about these sports, they like kind of at a glance seem very similar, but there's nothing similar really about hockey and soccer, and the rules are different and the regulations are different. And so if we try to apply what we did in person to online and we try to replicate rather than reimagine, we're missing the point. And similarly, if we don't really fully explore all the possibilities of online, then we're missing out on a lot of potential. So I actually have produced 3 times an event that has over 500 people. And in the afternoon, we get into different Zoom rooms, not just breakout rooms, but separate Zoom links based on how people answer the question on the US Census around race and ethnicity. So the
Mm.
conference is about having race dialogues and building an anti-racist community. And 300 plus people select that they are white on the US Census, and they come into this room. And then I put them in breakout rooms of 10 each with an assigned facilitator who's been trained on how to host these kinds of conversations and facilitate these kinds of dialogues. And then the second half hour, they get to choose one of 6 subtopics that they want to be in a room with people about. And I'm again able to get them into rooms of about 10 based on a specific topic, one of 6, with a trained facilitator. If I tried to reimagine doing this in person, it would be chaos. I mean, how big of a room would you need? You need like a ballroom, or would you need like the entire wing of a hotel? How would people know where to go? How many extra volunteers would I need to direct people? How late would people be coming to the table? How disruptive would that be to those intimate conversations? So here's an example that we are so far beyond 45 minutes of death by PowerPoint, right? We're so
Yeah.
far beyond that. We are truly designing an experience to reach a specific outcome. And that group of people gets to have, like you said, those really amazing, intimate conversations because of it being online.
Oh, it's huge. And I think if we just reconsider, because I also know people who were really burned out on Zoom by we'll just call it midway through the pandemic, right? We kept thinking it was ending. And I personally never got burned out on Zoom. I mean, not that I didn't miss like getting up and walking around and doing some things like that I had to like incorporate new habits around, right? But because Zoom always felt like such a connection tool for me, and I'm a people person and I enjoy connecting and talk, like it didn't ever burn me out. That part always felt good. But yeah, did I attend some events where I was like, "Ooh, that was not very good?" Certainly, right? And so I think this conversation continues to be relevant regardless of where you are on your experience of Zoom. There's no, even though, and I'm smiling because I'm in the legal industry, I'm starting to say like there's no going back to the way things were, and hallelujah, even though certain people will try, like old school event planners of in-person events. And the online experience can just take everything to the next level. I would love for you to share a bit on the transformational piece. And I love the way you describe it. Like you show up thinking, feeling, and doing something one way, right? And then you finish the event or the Zoom experience thinking, feeling, doing something else. What happens in the middle is transformation. Can you talk to us about how we do that better? How do we approach that piece so that we're actually getting an outcome that looks like transformation, right? Versus an information dump or a frustrating experience for people.
Yeah. Well, one is to acknowledge that in person has restrictions. We're always talking about how online has restrictions, but I've been to conferences with 42 concurrent sessions. You can't tell me that's a good design. And that is happening because we only have 3 days to be at this conference because we all have to travel to this one location. I've been to conferences that have taken over an entire downtown, right? I've never been to South by Southwest, but basically I've gone to conferences that size in Detroit. I had to decide whether I could make it the 1.2 mile trek to the next session in time before the next session happened. Like, and no one said, "Oh, in person, in person, this is not sustainable." I'm so burnt out on this, right? We just like, this is the rules. This is what I'm saying. If you play hockey
Yes.
and you want to excel, you learn how to play that game really, really well. But
Mm.
then if you switch to soccer, you got to learn it all over again. Now, some of the things you learn from hockey will help you be a better soccer player. I can't believe I'm using a sports ball reference. So unlike me. It's not really on brand, but I think the masses get it. So I think,
Totally.
first of all, it's accepting that, there are limitations on both of these, and there are also possibilities on both of these. I personally envision a future where in person is held sometime throughout the year for these major events, these annual conferences, but that their in person events are preceded and sometimes
Mhm.
after their event will be some kind of virtual program. That instead of it just
Mm.
being these 3 days that are packed and only some people can come because of both the price ticket and the travel and the time, that maybe it's a 3 month program and that includes time before, during the in person and after, and that you're including like just so many more of your community. And some will go to all the things, some will go to one of the things, but you will have a better job retaining members, retaining alumni, retaining connections, and adding way more value to the experience. The difference for me between in person and virtual, and one of the, I think, one of the more transformational things, is how easy it is to have reoccurring connections. I can meet someone
Mm.
once at a conference and have to wait an entire year before I see them again. Maybe at that point we exchange contact info, but do we actually talk again until year 3? Maybe not. Maybe year 3 is when we finally start making plans. Well, now I'm just more likely, as is everyone listening. Zoom is no longer this weird foreign thing. We can meet someone at an in-person conference or maybe at a Zoom event and
Mm.
say we should get on a Zoom next week. Like, we all know how to do it. We're all ready to do it. There is just greater potential for transformation in that way as well, whether you're personally networking or networking for your business or trying to get a job. Um, I think facilitation goes such a long way because you can design an excellent session. So I think, event
Mhm.
design is part of that purpose first piece, right?
Yep.
But too many facilitators have gotten only to sort of a base level of understanding of how to use Zoom. They they do they
Mm.
do enough. It's very basic though. And basic was wonderful for 2020. They probably felt advanced in 2020. But back then, just knowing to enable breakout rooms in the account you wanted to use them in before you went to open them was amazing. Knowing how to mute people, you were amazing. We're done that enough. That's it. We got to go more. So I think part of the transformation is expecting more of yourself. I have this mantra around getting 5% better. I believe we all should get
Mm.
5% better, whether we're hosting, speaking, or even participating. And that we should, I mean, one of the ways that it's great to be a participant virtually is that you can be active in chat and have people know who you are. Really
Totally.
hard as an introvert to do that in a public space
Yes.
in person, but you could do two different things virtually that I think anyone could do. One, recaps. What are your takeaways as people are speaking? Think of this as live tweeting, but in a Zoom chat, right? What are those kernels that you hear? What are the quotables?
Mhm.
Throw it all in chat. The other is if a resource is mentioned from stage, share it. You go find the
Mm.
book link on Amazon. You go find the podcast. You go find the website that was mentioned and you put it in chat. Do you have some of your own resources to share? Sure, weave those in. But if you're also sharing other people's content, no one's going to think you're being spammy. And I
Mm.
think you can't, that's an example of something we can't easily bring back to in person unless there's a really active Twitter channel, which these days, not going to happen.
Yeah,
Not going to
right.
happen. That moment is past. That is very like 2000s and not yet since. So I think this is some of the examples. Like facilitation is also understanding the platform. So I specialize
Mhm.
in Zoom because Zoom's constantly changing. It's enough to keep up with one platform, but of course there are many others. Knowing which way to point, for instance. So we're now on video, and of course, people are going to be listening to this. They can't follow along, but I'll just say that a lot of times when people say, go up here to the top right of your video, they point to their top right, which is
Yes.
actually top left for the people who are watching. And I know that there's this thing called mirroring, but that will only change what you see. And if you don't understand that, then you're not going to be pointing the right direction. And that's part of that Zoom fatigue and that like brain fatigue we talk about. People's brains have to constantly retranslate what, oh, you said go ahead and raise your hand in chat. And my brain's like, wait, is there a raised hand function in chat? It's like,
Yeah.
no. Oh, I know what they mean. Like all of that is part of the fatigue.
Mhm.
Poor quality audio also is a real problem. Yeah, you can have bad video. People will kind of deal with video glitches, but if your audio is bad, even if they stay on, they're more likely to leave. There's a study that says that people will think of you as basically less knowledgeable. They won't like you as much. So
Ah.
really, even if they stick around, it's not to your favor, it's to your detriment. So these are just, I mean, there's so many moving pieces. So rather than trying to learn all of it, just aim to get 5% or better each time.
That's such an important piece. I even love your reframe around being a participant, right? Because I think a lot of people listening are probably right now thinking from the standpoint of a host or an entrepreneur or business owner who has to regularly, utilize an online platform and way to connect with folks. And even just from the participant standpoint, right? Thinking about using Zoom as an extended networking opportunity, even when that's not what's happening in the moment. It
Mm-hmm.
behaves in that way because, and you raised a really important point, even around the facilitation piece, which is this element of time and exposure to other humans, which is in of itself transformational.
Yeah,
And
one of the things I've learned to do as a trainer, because a lot of what I end up doing is, I'm hired to produce virtual events, which
Mm,
includes training speakers, but I'm also invited to just come and train people on this idea, right? Like come and I got a couple of different decks, things I can teach. Well, it's really hard. Like, how do I make training interesting? I mean, it's all content. So one of the things I do, I'm gonna give you my two favorite things. Okay. I have a pause slide and a you are here slide, and I have those inserted after not necessarily every segment, but most of them. The pause
mm,
slide says jot your takeaways and write your questions in chat. And I ask people to write the word question in caps before their question in chat. But I'm asking them to write their takeaways in the chat, which gets the chat really active. And I
mm.
get to get instant response, which again, I wouldn't have in person about what's resonating. And because I've stopped talking while the pause slide is up, I can glance at those and see if anything needs to be urgently responded to because if there's a lot of confusion, I'll
Yeah.
respond to that. I have someone behind the scenes copying the question and the person's name into a separate shared Google Doc. So I can kind of reference back to that as we're going. The next slide is the you are here slide. It's my agenda,
Like your
but the next
roadmap.
topic
Mm,
is now lit up with a different color. It's the roadmap. It's a train station map. Here's
mm.
the station we're pulling into. And between the silence is a great way to get everyone's attention online. When I stop talking, the people who are multitasking, their their brains get completely pulled back into Zoom. Like, wait, did I lose internet? Oh, 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 wow, chat's really active. Oh, look at all these things people are learning. Maybe I should pay attention to this.
That
That's
is
part of the transformational experience.
mm,
The curation of people coming in, and then, we've attracted these people. How do we get them to be active participants?
yeah, I think that's huge. And I've watched some people who on their own kind of figure out like how do they in their style get people to engage in chat or whatever. But you've raised a couple of points right now that I think a lot of people haven't thought about or used probably in this way successfully. Silence, the roadmap, right? The pause, like even those simple tweaks, I'm guessing, can make a big difference to the entire experience.
Well, and earlier you talked about being inclusive, and one of my favorite ways to be
Mm,
inclusive is, first of all, very thoughtfully structured breakout rooms, which I
mm,
mean, 10,000 words out of 64,000 in my book is about breakout rooms. So lots to cover. But a lot of people forget to do a debrief. And to me, a breakout room isn't really finished unless there's some kind of debrief. But the
Mhm.
default debrief is to have people raise their hand in some fashion, either, wave their hand at the camera
Mm.
or raise their hand in the Zoom.
Like when you
And
bring them back together
yeah,
and
when they
you're
come
like,
back
let's
together in the main room.
quickly. Yes,
But
exactly.
certain people are always going to raise their hand. I am a person, I'm an outgoing extrovert. I will raise my hand. I don't even know what the question is going to be, right? Like that's who I am. Yeah. But that means all the people who are shy and are introverted and are new and are this language we're speaking in is not their first language, or they're younger or older
Mm.
or visibly or somehow different, or who knows, right? So I like having nominations in chat. So if I have people sharing wins or something, or
Yes.
sharing stories, and I say, hey, if you heard a particularly awesome story, nominate that person in chat. So that's one way to get, maybe sometimes person on their first day coming to the meeting, they get nominated. Another one is who took notes. So some people are always natural note takers. Hey, who are our natural note takers? I know some of you are just taking notes the whole time. I would love you to use the raise hand feature and share your top 2 takeaways. What a way to honor those people who probably weren't on the mic the whole time,
Mm.
right? Because they were busy taking notes. And because they took so many notes and then picked their top 2, they're probably good contributions. So both of those are a way for us to get good ideas out of those breakout rooms without defaulting to
Mhm.
the same person all the time. I've got more, but there are ways to just kind of mix that kind of thing up. And that's part of it. It's like you plan that ahead. I host a weekly call, not a weekly call, a monthly call for the National Speakers Association called Mic Swap. It's a tight hour. It's 3 breakout rooms. I teach something, not necessarily my content. I grab content out there in the world. I share links. We talk about it for a few minutes. People get in and out of breakout rooms. And part of what I'm trying to show them is how in 1 hour, we're
Mm.
networking, we're learning, we're laughing, we're getting to know each other and a little bit about ourselves. We're getting ideas. People are forming, peer masterminds because of this. People are forming accountability partnerships. It's another form of networking. Like it is a
Yes.
networking event,
Totally.
but it is more than a networking event. It's an experience, and it's done in a tight hour, right? So I think this is one of those examples. I think too often we can't see beyond what we've seen before, which is why I think it's good to go to a lot of other things people host. And I tend to give a lot of unsolicited feedback after going. And if they take my unsolicited feedback, oh gosh, I'm awful. I've given people video tutorials and step-by-step bullets and screenshots. But if they are like, oh, ego aside, Robbie actually
Right?
gets paid to do this,
Maybe
we'll
I should
improve. Then I'm like, I'll
listen.
keep coming back and I'll talk about it. Like the one we talked about earlier with Michael and Jason. I think they had a great concept, minor tweaks. It's a phenomenal event.
Yeah, totally. And if you're listening and thinking like, "Oh my gosh, I would love for people to show up to my event." How large or how small really doesn't matter, but have an experience where they get to learn, they get to connect, they get to laugh. And I don't think people always know even how to do that piece the right. Like there's so much more we could cover. Maybe I'll have you back for part 2. Um, you need to be hopping over and getting Robbie's book, probably getting everything else that you put out there. I'm laughing because earlier in the conversation, you said basic will no longer cut it. And my brain went to a very funny part of the pandemic where in the legal world, this video hit the internet and like attorneys around the world were laughing for days over
Oh,
this
was this the,
one
the
like
cat? I am not a cat.
yes, the 10-second clip. I died. The attorney in me died like a real
Yeah.
death, but I laughed so hard. And like I'm thinking of that now, like
I met
folks,
my friend Elizabeth Steele because of that clip. She teaches lawyers how to present virtually, and she got invited by the New York Bar Association to do a program, and it was titled "I Am Not a Cat." And I had seen the clip, and I thought I have to see what she puts out there. And yeah, I refer to her in my
oh my
book and everything.
gosh,
But
I
yes,
love it
that
so
moment taught
much.
everyone just how off track things can get.
Exactly, over like one simple, which also ties back to your theme that I love about like, hey, each time let's just do it 5% better. And I think that's what makes your book feel so easy and truthfully enjoyable to consume is it's like, just like you've given us, dozens probably of things already right now in this one conversation that we could just go work on one or two of those, we'd be 5% better. And it would change not only our trend lines, but the experience of that particular event. So, Robbie, out of respect for our time, I want to, first of all, thank you for coming today. I feel like people are like, woohoo, I have something that feels accessible that I can go do and try. That's how I'm feeling, even just as a refresher of some of the things that you taught in your book. For folks that are listening and do want to take it a step further and connect with you, go learn about some of your other resources, where would you send them?
So if you want to get all the free bonus resource library content for Breakout of Boredom, low tech solutions for highly engaging Zoom events, please go to breakoutofboredom.com. You'll find all of my books and their free resources. All of them have resources you can get even without buying the book. I just want you to have it at robbiesamuels.com. I host a monthly No More Bad Zoom virtual happy hour, which is wonderful for entrepreneurs. We have a guest come and speak and share 20 minutes. We go in and out of breakout rooms. We share our wins. We do a choose your own adventure breakout room where you get to choose different rooms to move in and out of. And that is nomorebadzoom.com. And I'll just mention that I host this weekly mastermind all the other Fridays called Content and Connection Club. It is $25 a month. There is no zero missing. Half the money goes to Feeding America. I love that their work helping our food insecure neighbors get meals. And I get to share a little bit about my business. We share wins and we open it up to have a mastermind. And I do this, it's a give back. These are the people who really years ago helped me figure out that I had a business plan when I basically had nothing. I mean, like a lot of people, my world was entirely in person. So I would, if folks are looking for that little bit more, there's lots of ways to ask me questions. There's a free monthly event, or you can come every week and ask me questions and ask the group, the collective community questions. We have an online portal. I give away lots of free content to that club. Basically, all my replays go there. So yeah, so go to robbiesamuels.com. You'll see join the club up in the top right corner. And I love people to reach out on LinkedIn. People don't do this enough. If you hear me on a show, tell me what show you heard me on. Join up. I share tons of content through LinkedIn, and I would love to get a conversation going there.
I love it. I'm a super fan of LinkedIn. So you heard it here. Go find Robbie Samuels on LinkedIn. Go get access to all of his amazing resources. I will share all those links and anything else you'd like me to share at the show notes page, which is legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Find Robbie's episode. You're going to be set, folks. You need this. I know you need this. I need this, right? And making that 5% goal just makes it feel so much more accessible. Robbie, thank you so much again for joining me. I just really love your topic. I think it's brilliant. I think, there's nobody that's going to hear this that's like, this is not for me. We all have to do this and we all have to do it better. So I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely.